Okay, you honorable assholes. I'm Brian. This is my man Craig. And today we have a special guest, Kenny. And welcome to the BS Talk Experience. Check it out. Two bald white dudes talking about shit we shouldn't. Now, we created the arena for guests to discuss the most controversial topics that up until now are not discussed in the media. We aren't here to battle or provoke our guests, but to provide our guests a platform to discuss their tangents. Now, can you guys imagine having access to a talk show that hosts guests that have experienced things such as murder, sex trafficking, drug running, steroid use, life on Indian reservations, and even prison? Well, that's what today's show is about, is the prison series. Now, here we are, here you are, and here is your funnel for the most lively discussions surrounding the most taboo of topics. Now, make sure you check back every Wednesday for a fresh serving of pure, unadulterated perspective at the BS Talk Experience. Craig?
Good evening. This evening we have Kenny Partlow with us, a 56-year-old fully recovered and reformed multi-felon convict. My friend was locked down for a combination of 21 years with his first incarceration at the age of 15 and his first felony conviction at 18. Kenny's more severe convictions were kidnapping, armed robbery, controlling a criminal enterprise, conspiracy to buy and sell drugs, amongst others. Kenny grew up enjoying the support of two loving parents and a close kinship with his older brother. As he looks back on his steady slip into the outlaw lifestyle, he recalls his fascination as a young man with the underworld and the seeming glamour of the criminal lifestyle. In 6th grade, Kenny began to drink and use marijuana, which led to an eventual full dive into hard drug use at age 15. These decisions led to his first incarceration as a sophomore in high school, much to the dismay and his shame of his mother, who was a teacher in the same school system. With the majority of his adult life spent behind bars, Kenny missed many climactic family moments, including his own brother's death by drowning. Recently, at age 54, Kenny was released from prison. He's been out for 16 months, been sober from alcohol and drugs for over 5 years, and enjoys full-time employment as a maintenance tradesman at a privately funded halfway house. He is now loved, depended on, and respected by many as a leader in righteousness and steadfastness in the ex-con community. Brian and I are proud to host Kenny's life story, a narrative full of deep valleys but a triumphant and happy ending. An ending that continues today. Welcome, Kenny.
Thank you. Welcome.
Absolutely great to have you. Now, as we progress through this wild roller coaster ride we know you're about to take us on, why don't we take it all the way back and why don't we talk about what your childhood was like?
Actually, my childhood was a very good one. Started kind of rocky. My birth father was a Marine who had an affair with my mother. She was a bartender, and he flew off to Vietnam, got killed. She, through however means, it was found out by her husband that I was not his, so I was given up for adoption and raised by the parents, who I call my mom and dad, in Northern California. And had a childhood that was great, wanted for nothing, and extremely close to my mom and dad.
So now you've got this great family dynamic. You've got this wonderful, privileged childhood. How and why did a life of crime start?
You know, that's an interesting question that I've asked myself many times. How is it that with such good influences at home, I always had that fascination for the outlaw lifestyle and bikers and the underworld, pretty much. And I really can't put my finger on that because I had a strict upbringing and I had parents that I knew loved me. I never really even saw them yell at each other. But yet, from the earliest memories that I can remember, and even my mom and dad telling me, we'd be off camping and I'd wander over to the camping site with the bikers and start asking them questions about their bikes and be fascinated with them. And my dad would usually yell at me, "Get over here. What are you doing over there?" So it started young.
Okay.
As you look back at started young, how young were you when, as you look back now, where you had a fascination with those that were a bit more ruddy?
Yeah, well, my mom told the story often of how the first day of kindergarten, she had to come take me out of class because we were lined up after recess and the kid behind me had pulled on my ear and I turned around and broke his nose. And
Age 5.
yes, that's at age 5, and was literally kicked out or suspended or had serious problems fighting and crazy activity from the first grade.
Why don't you carry us through some of those more climactic moments
Okay, well,
as a kid?
yeah, I would say having a brother 2 years older and remembering literally that fighting him and his friends was a normal activity, whether that was through my attitude or their predatory personalities, or maybe a combination of both. That is something I grew up with and was always in trouble fighting. And I've always been like the underdog that couldn't stand bullies, and if given the chance, would love to put them in their place. And as far as I think that attitude and that different personality trait was magnified and got a lot worse once in 6th grade I started drinking and doing drugs.
So 6th grade, you're drinking, you're doing drugs, and that magnifies stuff. And we know your first conviction was at 15. Let's talk about the very first time you got arrested. What was that experience like, and what was it for?
Yeah, the very first time I was arrested, I believe, was for breaking windows at junior high during a concert. And I was actually put in a police car, and my parents had to come down and talk to the police, and they let me out of the back of the car. You know, this is back in the 70s where the parents could talk to the police officer and they'd say, okay, take him home. Second arrest, probably for shoplifting. Third arrest, I believe, was for the one I got sent away for was we were at a skateboard ramp and the nemesis, my enemy from the neighborhood, had walked by, and I actually had a broken ankle and was on crutches. And he walked by, and right as he was turning the corner, he flipped me off. My brother, who was 2 years older, and this kid was 1 year older, and he was a tough kid. I was kind of intimidated by him. So my brother ran over there to fight him, and I was on crutches, and as I crutched over and saw this kid as I turned the corner pounding my brother's head in the asphalt, and I freaked out, dropped one crutch and cracked his head wide open with the other crutch, and literally was horrified that I had just done that to another person. And his friend grabbed me, and there was a whole family watching the whole thing transpire in their front yard watering the lawn. And his friend said, why did you do that? And I don't know why. I just said, because I can't stand that little fucker.
And how old are you right now?
15.
Okay.
And I was just protecting my brother. So the police came, went through the court proceedings, and it was either go to youth authority, California Youth Authority, which is your next step is prison, or go to a reform school that was private that my mom and dad had went online and found. So I ended up going there.
Okay, and now the reform school, was that like a military school?
The reform school was a Christian-based private boarding school, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it's amazing because, and that's a whole nother story, but I did read the word a little bit, and sitting in sermons from the owner of the place, actually thought I had become a Christian, and learned later in life that you can say a prayer and you can do the little motions, and it doesn't mean anything if you're not committed to it, obviously. You can have a Corvette in your driveway or a drag car in your driveway and call yourself a racer, and you're not until you get in it and race.
Right.
So with that being said, I'll never forget the day that Bon Scott was found dead, who was one of my heroes, lead singer for AC/DC. Thanks for asking. January 19th, I believe, 1980, he was found dead. It might have been February 19th, but that's the day I got jumped by 5 guys and beat almost to death. And that, recovering from that, is when I started lifting weights and became big and dangerous, not just a little skinny, dangerous kid.
Okay, so now you are going through this boarding school, and you get out. Now you're lifting weights, and you're kind of on a war path. And so, what is the next step to the next form of life of crime?
And getting out, but clearly not reformed.
Absolutely not reformed. And it's a funny story because it was a co-ed place, and I got a girl pregnant there. Thought I was in
high
love.
five now.
Yes.
Thought I was in love. Okay, who is now my beautiful daughter Danielle Cherie Partlow, and married her at 16, and moved to Helena, Montana. Absolutely, doing drugs, high all the time, worked full time, supported my family. It was a real paradox there. And she OD'd, and we went back to California, which was back to my hometown. Big mistake. Got involved with the wrong people. Ended up living with Sergeant at Arms of a club. Met the president. Moved in with the president. Did errands for him. Loved him. Worshipped him. Wanted to be just like him. Who he's still in my life as one of my mentors. He ruled with an iron fist. He was a badass. That every bike I ever built was just like his bike. Suicide, ape hangers, low, just that look. The old school gang. Now the gang bike look is the FXR or the Dyna, but back then, it was the low, chopped, upswept fishtails, suicide shift, ape hangers, etc. Went from that, living with him, to catching multiple felonies and going to prison.
Mm-hmm. And can we start with, we listed the felonies in the opening monologue. Can you run us through some of the stories that lead up to that?
Yeah, drug use.
Okay.
I was completely strung out, and of course, slamming, speed was my thing. We used to say crystal pistols and motorcycles, and an early date with the dude with the sickle. So I really lived that, and was all about it. And it's funny because when I was 16 years old, my brother-in-law told me, you can either lie, steal, grovel, cheat, and kill to get high, or you can sling a big enough bag to where you get high free and all of your little harem and all of your little hang-arounds are getting high with you. I chose the latter.
Understood.
So that always stuck with me. And every single one of my prison sentences were for a gun or involvement in the methamphetamine business. Every one.
Okay.
So you're heading in to your first sentence now in
Yes.
prison. And you were how old?
I was 19 years old.
Walk us through how you felt at sentencing in the courtroom, and then walk us through that first day in prison.
Well,
First night.
Yes, I was so spun out, and they actually did me a favor, and I believe it was a hand of God still in my life, that they sentenced me as an M number. And anybody from California knows in the 80s, the M numbers were a YA commitment, but older than 18. So you went to youth authority, but you were over 18, and you could get that M number until you were 21. And I was like one of the test cases, M0548, I believe was the number. Don't quote me on that. But I went to YA, which I ended up at the penitentiary of YA's, Preston, in Ione, California, which was literally like worse than prison, I found out later. We fought all the time, tear gassed all the time, rubber bullets all the time. They used to have a saying, the counselors got on the radio in the morning and said, work or trade, don't be afraid, because you would go out on the trade line and you would fight. And it was basically a training ground for prison. So I got kicked out of there, went to the hole in YA, and went straight on a bus to Vacaville, California. And I'll never forget that song, Don't Worry, Be Happy, was literally playing on the radio of the prison bus as we pulled into the Sally Port. And I looked up at those gun towers and said, wow, things are about to get real. Mm-hmm. Vacaville at that time was over 5,000 people. And it's just like all the old movies, 3 tiers, thousands of people, a whole city. And I came from YA into that, and I was scared. Anybody that says they're not scared is an absolute liar, because no matter how gangster you were, no matter what you were into, as a kid, I was like a teeny minnow in a sea of sharks, and it was scary. And once again, I was incredibly fortunate to see another guy I was in YA with, who had got kicked out too, who had just got there, and his older brother was a straight gangster that knew a lot of people and had a lot of juice, and he pulled us up under his wing. Mm-hmm. So
now, what did you get kicked out for?
Out of YA, fighting.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. More fighting.
Okay, so you're heading into prison. You're on the bus. You're unloading. Let's run through that first day, that first night, your feelings, your thoughts, what happened.
Yeah, it wasn't like Shawshank Redemption where guys are yelling at the fence, fish, 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 and you're like terrified of getting raped. It wasn't anything like that. It was more like really keeping to yourself, really not liking where you were at, but knowing inside, wow, I am going to make this. I'm going to survive, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive. So when we got into R&R, which is receiving and release, I was amazed that the inmates ran everything in California. The inmates took your picture, the inmates took your fingerprints, the inmates did your paperwork. And I got this guy that was really cool, and he said, wow, where'd you come from? I go, I just came from Preston, from YA. And he said, He said, well, this is going to be a lot more relaxing than YA, trust me. And I thought that was very strange. I was like, wow, okay. So I go through the R&R process, get my little bundle, pillow, blanket, etc. Get to a cell on the 3rd tier. I think it was, it doesn't matter, R wing, J wing, something like that. And it was actually you, up on the 3rd tier. And like I said, there were so many people that I was just like another little minnow in an ocean. And I just kept my head down and did what it took. And when we went to the yard, my friend and his older brother who scooped me up, and we started working out. And it just became a routine. And it's actually sad because I fell in so quickly and everything was so good that it was just like summer camp with the fellas. Mm-hmm. You know,
we've heard that before from others.
Yeah, all the terrifying, oh my God, I can't sleep, I might get raped. None of that even fazed me. Mm-hmm. It was like, whoa, boom, yeah, okay, I'll roll with this.
So now the question on that subject that you just discussed, because we all know, as we had, the discussion with our other gentleman, Dave, we talk about MSNBC and all these other shows that the average person that has never experienced anything in the criminal world, they have a Hollywood perspective of everybody's being like shanked or shanking, someone's always fighting, or you're being raped or you're raping somebody. That's pretty much Hollywood, right?
Right.
So how much of that was a reality that you were just shielded from because of your connections and resources?
Well, that's a great question, and it has shifted over the years because in the 80s when I did time, which by the way, I have a C as in Cadillac number, and they've went all the way through the alphabet and now are 3/4 of the way through the alphabet with double letters, like all the way through the alphabet. Now they're back to double A, then double B, double C, double D, and I think they're like a double T now. So that's literally like 3 million people since I got my number in 1984. C93488. So then you could literally stick somebody full of holes and catch a 115 right up, do a little hole time and get back out of the hole and everything was fine.
And now what is a 115 write-up?
That's a major write-up.
Okay.
Okay. And now you even punch somebody and draw blood, you can get 5 years. Quite a different, I mean, now it's a kinder, more, I don't know, authoritative, more locked down. You just don't get away with things like you did back then. Back then, I literally went for months without ever speaking to an officer, unless it was, hey, can I get in my cell? Or, hey, I need to see my counselor. Is he in today? That was it. That was it. Now it's like you talk to cops every day and it's like they're all in your business and oh, that TV, the cord's too long. You need to tuck that fan in. Your blanket isn't folded right. You have 2 pillows. I'm going to have to write you up for that. I mean, it's so different and so petty and so incredibly lame is the only way I can describe it, which maybe that's better.
It's almost like a National Guard boot camp focus.
Oh my God. I mean, back then it was straight gangster. You walked into your counselor and said, he would say, okay, what are you doing to program? I lift weights and I play handball and I try not to get in fights. Okay, great. You're doing good. I'll see you in 6 months. Now it's like, okay, have you taken your anger management classes? It says here you've only done 14 classes. You should have done 26. If you miss a couple more, we're going to have to write you up for that. Then you're not going to get visits and you're not going to be able to get store and you're not going to like it. Oh, by the way, you have a write-up for too many appliances. Yeah, this is really looking bad. That's the contrast between the 80s and now. It's night and day. And pardon me for saying, and I know there's good DOC officers out there. Every yard has good ones. But most of them are straight up Walmart rejects that could not pass a physical fitness test if their life depended on it. And they are in your face telling you your hair is too long. Oh, you need to shave. You're not going to chow. Go back. I mean, can you imagine getting up and going to work and having an officer standing outside of the chow hall, plucking your ID off your chest saying, you haven't shaved, go back and shave. And you know when you go back and shave, when you come back, the chow hall's closed. You just got burnt. You got to go to work hungry. It's a bad scene.
I can imagine.
So, what level of yard is this that you're at?
I've been on every level from minimum. For years, they wouldn't even let me at minimums or mediums. I was all about the high medium to the whole. High medium yard, in the drama, to the whole, boom, to Supermax. 6 or 8 months in Supermax, maybe over a year. Whoop, back to a high medium, in the drama, to the whole, back to Supermax. That's how I lived my whole life for years.
Basically a cycle based on behavior then that you were...
Well, and everybody that I hung with, everybody that was all about it, did the same thing. That was a badge of honor.
So this first time that you went in at 19, you had the friend that you met.
Yes.
You went into prison, which was a level
3.
So you get into that 3 yard. You meet your buddy's brother. I assume it was a segregated prison?
Well, then the level 3, and that was Solano, was the first big yard I was at. They had just opened it, and everybody was still fighting for the pecking order of the prison. And one other thing a side note that I will make mention of now, is in the 80s, the Crips and the Bloods, which are 2 black predominant gangs in prison, were killing each other at such an intense level that the whites stood back and watched it happen. Then you had the Norteños, which are red rags, and the Sureños, which are blue rags. Anything from below Fresno is the Sureño. number 13, if you're wondering. The Norteños, red rag, number 14. That's just the way they roll. And that's very important stuff because they die over those colors and they die over those numbers, seriously. And they were killing each other at such a rapid rate that the whites we'd get out on the yard, one of those factions would start something and end up rioting and killing each other while the whites stood back and waited for the yard to open because we came out first. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of fortunate in that sense too.
Now, those two gangs that you subsequently mentioned after the Bloods and the Crips, were those Latino gangs, Mexican gangs?
The Bloods and the Crips are predominantly black.
Yep, but then the other two.
The Norteños and Sureños are all Mexican.
Got it.
And then later you had the Border Brothers and the Wetback Power. Yes, that's their own name. And what they call the Pisces, which are Mexican nationals that aren't really ganged up, but they're very cliquey. They're the ones that you see all the families at the flea markets. Those are Pisces. And you know, the gangsters and the gangs and the street people with the flannels and the lowriders and stuff, those are Chicanos. Big difference. So yeah, it was very comforting for the whites in those years because they took care of themselves and we just sat back and watched it.
They basically fought and destroyed their own.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, how much time did you do in that first stay at 19?
I actually did a chunk, got out, went back, got out, went back, got out, went back 4 times. And the problem was the last violation, I had 1 month left and my brother drowned. And I'll never forget it because I was actually in Vacaville when the officer opened up my door and I was playing pinochle with a guy and the chaplain was standing behind him. And like a smart ass, I looked at him and I said, "Oh, what's up? Somebody die?" And the cop gave me a really sad look and the chaplain standing behind him said, "Is your name Partlow?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." And he said, "Yeah, somebody died. Can you step out?" So they brought me to his office and told me my brother had drowned. And this is my only brother. He was 2 years older. And it was terrible because the last time I had talked to him, I called him everything but anything nice and hung up on him over a little dope deal and never talked to him again. So when they told me that he was gone, I got a meeting with my counselor, who was a black gentleman and couldn't stand me and or people like me, troublemakers. And he told me I was not going to his funeral, which was actually 50 minutes away from Vacaville to a little less than an hour to Livermore, California. And so I said, "Really, is that the way it is? You're not going to let me go?" And he said, "No, you're a troublemaker. You're not going anywhere." So as I got up and started walking away from his desk, I grabbed his gold pen out of his pocket and stuck it in his neck and pinned him on the ground and said, "How about I say who goes to your funeral? How do you like that?" So he pushed the panic button. I got beat down, beat senseless, drugged to the hole, locked down in the hole. And a couple weeks later, they finally let my mom come to see me. So here I was, thought I did the cool gangster thing. And my mom came to see me, and it was behind the glass. I was in a jumpsuit, shackled down, could barely hold the phone against my ear. And my mom just stared at me, and she had aged 10 years. It was horrible. And she just shook her head and said, "Why? Why? What is wrong with you?" And I had no answer. It broke my heart.
And you were how old at this point?
I believe 21.
Still a young man.
Yeah. And, it's weird because I never could cry, never shed a tear. My only brother gone, and it was like, oh, well, bummer. Until my dad came to pick me up. One of the only times my dad came to prison to pick me up. Oh, by the way, I got a year for that assault. And instead of 1 month left, I had 13 months left. And that just really did something to my mom and dad. So he came to pick me up, and on the drive home, We didn't talk much, but he had to get back to work, so he dropped me off at home, and I sat there, and I walked over and picked up a family photo album and started looking through it and just straight broke down. That's when I realized how much I missed my brother and what a complete fool I was for acting like that.
Back into the real world, and then those emotions are a flood.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It was painful. So
there you are, back home, dealing with emotion that you didn't think you had the capability to muster. And then what does the next month look like?
Walked right out the door and medicated the pain. Mm-hmm. Boom. You know, the terrible thing about doing time is, and everybody that's done time that slings the bag or is in that world knows this to be a terrible truth. You get out of the joint and it's like a war hero coming home, and everybody's got a chick for you or a bag of dope for you or a 12-pack, and they all want to party and they all missed you, and you look good, you're healthy, you're all yoked up, and you tell all the prison war stories, and it's all kinds of fun. And right about the time you get all strung out and ready to get violated and go back, nobody wants you around, because if you're not the one slinging the sack, you're sucking off of them. And you've become a burden, a scary burden that is kind of intimidating, and boom, they all chew you up, spit you out, and you're on your way back. It's a vicious cycle.
So how long were you out before you went back?
That time, each time I was out anywhere from 10 days to 6 months was pretty much making it longer than 6 months was like unheard of. So I got out that last time, immediately went on the run. My PO hated me. She would look at me and I was all yoked up, and a couple months later she would see me and say, "Oh, boom, you're strong, you're spun. I know the signs." And they were so mad because I would always turn in clean, pretty much because an old timer inside had told me how to beat the old UAs. And so I decided to come down to Arizona to go to school, and I filled out all the paperwork because my homeboy from my hometown was down here going to school, and told me while I was on the tier in prison on that last stretch, you need to get out of Livermore in the Bay Area and you need to come down here as soon as you get out. And I said, boom, I'm going to do it. So he had all the paperwork sent to me. I filled it all out, got approved for a Pell Grant and a student loan, and came to Phoenix, Arizona, and started going to school, which lasted not even 1 year, because in about 11 months later, I had already, because we were cooking dope while going to school, met everybody who was anybody at that time, 1988, in Phoenix, Arizona. And by February, I came out on March 7th. Ted Nugent was playing at the Memorial Coliseum that night. You can look it up, 1988. At Winchell's Donuts, 27th Ave and Northern. That's where we got off the freeway. Never been to Phoenix in my life. Cranked up Ted Nugent, walked into Winchell's, bought some donuts, looked at a dude at the parking lot and said, "That dude slams dope." Hey, called him over, told him, boom, see that? Get me a 10-pack. He ran over, caught it, and it was on. Mm-hmm. I got kicked out of school for pistol whipping a guy from Kansas that I did a bike deal, nice shovelhead. And as soon as we did the deal, he disappeared. So I thought he burned me. I thought, wow, that's a bummer. I just got burned. A couple months later, it was probably like 6 weeks, he came back into town, and somebody else that we went to school with said, "Hey, man, I saw a dude. He's back in town." So when I went to school that day, like a complete idiot, at school, the only people that knew my real name, because of the Pell Grant and student loan, pistol whipped the dude, took the bike back. And the next day when I came to school, my theory instructor, Gary Jensen, hi Gary, credible guy, flat top,
Hi, Gary.
old school, waited in 115 degree heat for me. I was in a 69 primered Firebird, pulled up and saw him standing out there flagging me down. I said, "What's up, Gary?" He said, "The cops are back there waiting for you. They know you're a pearl jumper. You are in big trouble because of that incident yesterday." And I said, "What?" And my whole world came crashing down. It's like, no more school. I'm done. I got to go do a year violation in California just to get legal. And he said, "You're going to have to straighten up your legal problems before you come back to school." So that wasn't happening. So I left school and just turned full throttle. And like I said, didn't even make it a year. and wound up in prison here. Got 5 years for a stolen car, which I didn't steal. Slapped a dude around that owed me money, told him I'm taking your car until you can pay me, and turns out it was stolen.
You possessed a stolen vehicle as collateral.
I did. I did. And as I was saying earlier, I had an alias with all the proper paperwork and everything. And actually, sorry, Tony Ryder, one of my best friends was Sid Ryder. His younger brother was Anthony Ryder. And I used all his paperwork and family history and everything to skate for 4 or 5 arrests out here until they finally got me into county and did a complete pre-sentence report. I thought I was getting probation, thought I was slick. Anthony Ryder was my name. 2/13/69 was my birth date. Everything was good. And this one probation lady said, "You can't be that young. And there's no way you've never been to prison because of the way you speak and because of the ink that you have." And she dug deep and she pulled my covers. And right when I was going to get probation, thinking I had the system beat, they page two'd me, took me back downstairs under my real name, and I ended up getting 5 years for that car.
Wow.
Yes.
So off you go again.
Off I go. So I went, wow, okay, I'm going to try to run through this quickly because the time in Arizona was an absolute lark, if you want to say it that way. Before I went to prison, the Fed yanked me up for a manufacturing charge in Englewood, Colorado, because my homeboy had a stake in a chemical company, and as I said, we were putting together big batches here in Phoenix. 88, everybody remembers that. And that was around because there was only a few people putting it together back then, and we were one, and we were new in town. That's how I met everybody so quick. So he got busted in a Ryder truck that I allegedly forced a guy to rent, and that's what they got caught in. So when they jammed him up, he said, "Well, Kenny, blah, 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 blah." So I had to go face those federal charges, beat him because he didn't show up to court. I wonder whatever happened to that guy. Anyway, and once I beat that, we had put paperwork in on an officer in Englewood, Colorado. Word to the wise, don't ever mess around in the federal penitentiaries, because when you put paperwork on a cop, like write him up saying, "Oh, this guy was like looking at my butt and making weird homosexual comments." That's what we did because he UA'd us all, because we were all spun to the hubs in the federal joint. Thought, oh yeah, that'll keep us from getting UA'd. Oh, well, it did. We all went to the hole, and they put me on a either van, bus, or plane and flew me from, I think, El Reno, Oklahoma, to Santa Fe, New Mexico, to somewhere in Texas, to Lompoc, California, to Oregon, to Sacramento or somewhere nearby, California, back to Oklahoma, and then finally to Phoenix. And when I got off the plane in Phoenix, they took me straight to Alhambra and straight to SMU, Supermax. Mm-hmm. So, didn't work out too good. With that being said, I had a 7-4 number in Arizona, got to SMU, did I think 9 months there, went straight to Kaibab North, which is in Winslow, got in a riot, got in trouble at Kaibab North. They had just built Kaibab South, which was the higher. Kaibab North was a medium. This was a high medium. First 50 people moved there, and everybody knows who those 50 were. There was a lot of straight up folios. I was one of them. Opened the South Yard, was working, building the ACI building and the gym, making wicked double-bladed pieces, which are shanks, whatever you want to call them, 10.5 size boot. Fit right in the boot. Thanks for asking. When they found the first one of those, they were so terrible that they shut the yard down, brought the National Guard in, and combed the yard for 3 days with metal detectors and National Guard looking for those knives.
Well, guys, what did you guys think of Kenny? He is obviously awesome. We're taking you on this crazy roller coaster ride of a criminal career. And now that we're going into ending part 1, part 2 will be next week. Next Wednesday, you can catch part 2. So if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this as an audio podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, follow, whatever you need to do on that platform. Links will be down below. Share it with everybody you know so that everybody's caught up, because you can't miss part 2. Part 2, he is actually greenlit, which means there is a price and a bounty on his head to kill on sight. So he is greenlit, there is a bounty on his head, and people repeatedly try to kill him. Don't miss out on that, and we'll see you guys on Wednesday. Have a good one.